Hey, it's Ben,
I'm Russell.
and we're at Essen 2016 for Chits and Giggles.
Now, Kanagawa really intrigued me because it's a game about painting, and I don't know about you, but that just doesn't seem like a very exciting subject for a game. However, it really surprised me. It combines elements of set collection and push your luck, and essentially what you're doing is you're taking cards and you're either using them to add to your skill set, which you can use, to paint paintings, which is the other thing that you can do, the more which score you points. Now, it's just a really delightful looking game. It's really fun, it's not too long, and I do think it's one of ILO's best entries. So if you see it or you get a chance to try it out, definitely recommend doing that.
So every year they release the Kenner Spiel des Jahres, or the Connoisseur's Game of the Year. And what if I told you the same designer has won that the last 2 years in a row? And what if I told you that they have released another brand new game this year, and it could be the best one yet? The designer is Alexander Pfister, and the game is Great Western Trail. Now, I was lucky enough to both buy and play this game this year at Essen, and I fell in love with it instantly. In the game, you are trying to sell your cattle, take it to Kansas City, and make money. But you're also trying to collect victory points by selling it to the furthest cities away. And you'll do this through a whole series of different Euro-style mechanics. You've got deck building, you've got worker placement, you've got resource management. So all these different Euro-style mechanics have been mashed together in a very complex yet exciting new game from Alexander Pfister. In typical fashion with his games, I find that you stare at the board for a while and you think, what am I going to do next? But this game has got so many options, and each one feels valid and correct, and you never know what you're going to do. I can't wait to sink my teeth into it and start learning this game and perfecting it. So check out the Great Western Trail, Stronghold Games, Alexander Pfister, fantastic game.
This year, more than ever, it's all about the legacy gaming, not only with successful franchises such as Pandemic Legacy Season 1 and the reveal of Season 2, but also new IPs are entering the fray such as Seafall, and there are other games getting in on the territory such as Fabled Fruits and Zombies Run the card game. But what is legacy gaming? If only there was someone around who we could talk to. For those eagle-eyed viewers, yes, that was Rob Davio walking past, creator of Legacy Gaming and designer of hits like Risk Legacy, Pandemic Legacy and the new Seafall. And we managed to catch him and ask him a very important question. Can you settle a thing between me and my friends? Because we were discussing it the other day, and we just wanted to know from you, Mr. Legacy himself, how do you define a legacy game?
So my definition, which is going to be slightly different from other people's, right, as people play around and do new work with it, is it's got two parts. The first part is some of the actions you take in every game carry forward permanently to future games. And the second part is you don't get all the content at the beginning. And it's some new rules and some new content is unlocked over time, either through actions the players do or when the designer says so. So you've got a partial game at the beginning that new content comes out and you're changing it as you go. And when I put those two things together, I get a legacy game.
As Rob himself says, he's not the only one designing legacy games anymore. Now, titles like Gloomhaven are on the horizon, which invoke a similar idea, and even other big names like Friedman Freeze are creating games with a familiar concept.
I've heard a lot of excitement about this Fable-style game, and I just wanted to know, in your words, how would you describe the Fable style of game?
Right. So a Fable game, basically we created the concept, right? They pitched it to me. I said, oh, it kind of has this like legacy feel. But unlike a legacy game where, you destroy cards, you mark cards, the game is permanently and forever changed. In a Fable game, the mechanics start in a more or less simple kind of way, and then over time, new stuff comes out. and changes the game in a fundamental way.
So Fabled Fruits doesn't actually follow the legacy format. Instead, they go with something called the Fable. This essentially gets rid of the permanence element of legacy, but it still adds a progressive element to the game. So you start with the most basic actions represented by these cards, and as you play, you reveal more and more complicated ones. Now, what's interesting about this is that instead of a game like Pandemic Legacy, where you have a story element, and once you've played through the story, you've ruined the surprise, and so there's less incentive to play it again. In this game, you don't have that. There's no story to it. So essentially, you could play the game to the end, and there's nothing to stop you going back and playing it again at the beginning. So what other games could we potentially see with a legacy version? Dead of Winter Legacy? What about Netrunner? Could a living card game ever work with such a format? How about Robinson Crusoe Legacy?
Yeah, this is in 2013 we released the HMS Beagle campaign. Yes, this is 5 scenarios. So there's no ripping cards, there's no writing on the cards, but it's a campaign. Like you are saving the game, you are developing it. So Robinson is perfect for that.
Yeah.
So I will be working on the expansion for Robinson Crusoe, set on the Mythos island with the cultists, with the dark magic, all that kind of stuff. And there will be some elements of legacy in there.
There are bound to be more titles in the works then.
And I'll give you this. I know that they are working on another Fable game. So there is a potential for more of this kind of idea, this kind of concept that you don't really know what's happening next, and you find that out. You find that story out later on.
And so, with games out on Kickstarter, the recently announced Pandemic Legacy Season 2, and many other games here at Essen, it seems that there is still a lot of excitement here about legacy games. And legacy games have their own legacy in the form of Fable games. So you've heard of Tok Tok Woodman, or you might know it as Click Clack Lumberjack, but have you ever heard of Bling Bling Gemstone? It's a dexterity game that I like, which is rare enough, and essentially it's exactly the same as Tick Tock Woodman, except for obviously the difference in look, the difference in weight, and you got a new tool. So on your turn, you tap the tower twice, and any pieces that fall off are scores. Each piece is worth a different amount of points, but you must be careful because if you knock off one of the central pieces, that's going to be worth minus 10 points. And I must say, this is quite a gem of a game.
So do you have a favorite game and then you think, I just want more, and then they release an extension, and then they release a dice version? Well, this is what we like to call extended IP. You have an intellectual property, like something like Catan, and then they extend this intellectual property by adding dice versions, card versions, extensions, expansions, the whole works. Now, this is becoming a lot more common, and 2016 at Essen is no exception.
Just look how many there are. We didn't count exactly, but there must have been hundreds of extended IPs at this year's Spiel alone.
So here's an example that's being released this year. Here we have an expansion to a dice version of a board game. It's IP extension Inception. And to be honest, I think this is IP extension to the extreme.
But the big question is why? Developing board games is an expensive task, so is it for financial reasons, or is there more to it?
When you develop a game based on an established idea or theme, is part of the reason because of the finance, maybe it's cheaper and quicker and easier to develop these games, or is it because of customer demand? There's so many people who are like, I love Legrand, I want more, and you think, let's give them more.
Well, it's that. It's the same. It's essentially the same idea with an expansion, right? If a game is, selling really well, fans want to add more to it. In a lot of cases, sometimes the game is so perfect that adding stuff just doesn't make sense and it just doesn't work.
So obviously fans have something to do with it. But other times, it definitely feels like expansions were part of the plan all along. Russell asked Ignacy Chevicek for some clarification.
So we're going to talk about one of my favourite games, which is Imperial Settlers.
Thank you.
I was wondering, because it seems like a game that was sort of perfect for expansions. And was that planned sort of from the beginning?
Yeah. So when we released the game in 2013, we promised our partners who were buying license for the game for France, Spain, Germany, etc., that we will support the game for at least 3 years. So in the moment of release of the game, we had more or less ready ideas for the 3 years of expansions.
Okay.
And now I can say that we will support the line longer because I know the game is successful, the fans are buying the expansions, they are waiting for new factions. So there will be more than 3 factions, there will be more than 3 Empire packs. So yes, we'll support this game for a long time.
So we've learned that sometimes expansions are premeditated, sometimes they're due to business deals between publishers and suppliers, and sometimes it's just due to the demand of the loving customers. But just keep that in mind next time you're playing expansion, you think, this game's a pile of sheep.
Are you thirsty for a new type of game? Well then Fabled Fruits might be your kind of game. This is Stronghold's game's take on Legacy, but it's not Legacy, it's actually called the Fable format, which means that there's no permanent actions and you can reset the game at any point, but the game changes as you progress and you can save it at any point. This is essentially a set collection and worker placement style game where you are collecting fruits to make smoothies for the various animals of the jungle. You have control of an animal, and each time it's your turn you must move to a new location represented by cards. The cards are also the things that you can buy with the fruit to score points. But what's really interesting is the Fable format. Every time you buy a card, a new one comes onto the table, but instead of resetting the game back to the beginning at the end, you can save it by just using the same cards at the beginning of the next game. And as the game progresses, more convoluted and more complex and more intriguing cards get involved, and they add new mechanics to the game, such as markets or push your luck elements, which I actually really enjoyed. So because of that, it was my first purchase at Essen this year, we really recommend this and we think you should try it out.
So earlier I mentioned the IP extension Inception, and this is another example of that. This is an expansion to a two-player version of Seven Wonders. However, this one is not a pile of sheep. This one is amazing. This is Seven Wonders Duel Pantheon. This one adds a couple of things to the game. The main thing are these gods. And the thing I love about these gods is that on your turn, well, the first age you draft them, but in the second age you can start to buy these. And what I like about it is that you can actually use an action to buy one of these without having to take one of the cards from the board, which means you can effectively use it as a pass action. So not only is it interesting having these extra abilities, but it actually adds a whole nother level of strategy to the game. And to me, that was the most important thing that I loved. But they've also released metal coins for the game this year, metal tokens. It's amazing. Best expansion I've played so far this year.
So we've learned a lot of things.
Met a lot of designers.
We've played a lot of games.
I punched all of the punch boards in all the games I bought to get as much weight in my suitcase as I can.
But now I'm pooped. I am shattered.
Exhausted.
It's time to go home.
Yep.
If only we could find the exit.
Yeah.
Games like Pandemic Legacy Season 1 and the announcement of Season 2. Oh, look who it is!
Sorry, I thought it would be funny.
You've got a blooper reel now. We've got a